Can your talent be life-saving? I mean, when you think of talent, you're often thinking of the big ones, right? An applause, a stage, lights. You're probably thinking, these are the things that you either have or you don't. But I'd like to offer you a different idea and definition of what talent feels like. Because my idea of talent, just over a year ago, went up in flames. On January 7th, 2025, my family and I lost our home to the Los Angeles fires in Altadena, California. But not just our home, our entire town. This is an aerial satellite image of over 14,000 acres, 9,400 structures, all lost to a fire that burned for 24 days and stole the lives of 19 of my greatest neighbors. At the time, everything was gone. Overnight, our routines, our home, schools, post offices, gone. And as a family of musicians, there were no instruments, no microphones, just a lot of need. I was living in Boston at the time, and as the eldest and the only one that far away, I jumped on a one-way ticket back to what was left of my hometown, and almost immediately, I began to notice something, this sort of phenomenon that at the time I couldn't quite name, a way of thinking of talent I hadn't before. Let me explain. So, en route, I'm on the plane and I'm watching social media updates of my neighbors and childhood friends running from home to home in the smoke and in the dark with hoses and buckets and even trash cans filled with water. I watched them fight 80-mile-an-hour winds with no city power, dragging people from their homes, and I thought, these are the bravest things I've ever seen. And then I landed, and immediately, all of the fire and evacuation alerts started coming in. And it was donation centers and evacuation centers going, please come here. And I remember thinking how incredibly resourceful and what sheer manpower this would have required. And then as I'm making my way up into Altadena, there were folks on their lawns with signs that read, food here and free clothing here. And I thought, how incredibly responsive. And very early on, I realized I wasn't noticing skills or talent. It was something else. I call them microtalents. Microtalents are the tiny human aptitudes, things like bravery, quick wit, responsiveness, things that you wouldn't necessarily see on a resume, but they don't get a stage either. I realized very quickly that this was something I needed to understand a little bit more. So I started moving through what it would really take for a volunteer like the women and men who put together incredible donation efforts on parking lots and gas stations. Would they need to be quick and decisive, maybe deductive of what the needs really were? And as I moved through this experience, I noticed a lot of other small things that I, again, couldn't quite name. 2 days after the fire, my family and I were sitting in a diner, and we were waiting for our temporary housing to open up. They were in shock and disoriented. No one had really slept. No one had eaten. So our waiter comes over to us, and he's not overly friendly or anything, but he started asking us our orders. And I watched him change his approach when he realized that we were struggling to answer very basic questions like what we'd like to drink. And I remember him taking his time with us. He slowed his pace down, and I thought, that is a microtalent. A few weeks later, we found ourselves in a very different experience. Behind stage of America's Got Talent. Sorry, you asked, was that crazy of a leap? Yes, it was. I'll explain. The Sunday after the fires, we found ourselves on a Sunday for the first time since I was a little girl with nowhere to sing, no church home, no instruments. So we went to our neighboring town of Pasadena. And I think at that moment, we didn't really know what to do. So we sang. A video of this circulated online and eventually reached the producers of the show, who were already filming in the city of Pasadena, unbeknownst to us, and invited us to perform. So fast forward, we're behind stage. There's lights everywhere. There's a girl with a hula hoop, a trapeze artist. There's people falling from the ceilings. And I'm like, what did I just put my family into? And so a crew member comes up to us and he starts handing us our microphones. He's 1, 2, 3. And I remember mine being so cold and so heavy. And I just kind of focused in on its sensation. And then the crew member says to us, "I'm from Altadena too." I mean, we knew exactly what that meant. I started asking him all the questions. What are you doing? How are you here? How are you even at work right now? Where are you staying? Ben family, you're up. So he leans back into us and he says, "Thank you for being here." That was it. 5 words, and he walked away. In that moment, he made something greater than what we were doing. He gave purpose to us being there. He changed the size of what we were doing to town-sized in that moment. And I remember thinking again, that's a microtalent. I watched overnight heroes in my neighbors, not because they were trained firefighters, but because they were brave. And I watched humor show in places it had no business being. Anyone else's family is that family that makes a joke. My sister literally said, "Well, now we don't have to wash all the dishes that were in the sink." What? But I remember thinking, these are the qualities that I couldn't quite name at the time that were so stabilizing. They were situational and relational and invisible, yet they were the glue that seemed to be holding everything else together. As I began to kind of work through this idea, I was like, what is the difference between these microtalents and something like skills? Well, skills are trained, and through repetition and learning, you can really develop a skill. But talents are natural aptitudes. Things like quick wit and humor and bravery, again, they don't show up in the skills section on your resume, but they're not going to be performed on a stage either. And what I was learning very quickly is that this is not the first time we've seen this. I began to study through the decades and eras of our lifetime as a race how society functions and even recovers through these small, invisible networks of human aptitudes. Anthropologists have since learned that, turns out, we do not survive because everyone is exceptional at one thing, but because everyone is reliable at something. And in early communities, human communities, we learned that survival didn't just rely on individual participation, but on distribution. One person noticed talent, another person noticed danger. Someone stabilized the group when they saw danger. The next person mobilized to move us into a safe space. We're not talking about specialists. We're talking about contributors. So, Ted, when you came in today, you had a little notebook. Let's go ahead and pull those out. I'm going to ask you something. What are you naturally good at? Not trained, not practiced, not what got you into Berklee College of Music. No, what are the foundational abilities you were just born with? I'll give you a few moments to write down 1 or 2. So, as you're writing, can you convert calm into chaos? Can you transform heaviness into humor? Are you quickly deducing and logical? What makes you exceptional and unique? Now ask yourself, am I making good use of what I'm already good at? See, the great thing about microtalents is that it is fail-proof, niche-proof, and in my situation, even fire-proof. Microtalents ask us, are we showing up our full, talented selves every single day? And as we're working to improve upon the big things, have we taken full inventory of everything that makes us great? Because someone needs you. Someone is waiting on you. Someone in distress needs your steadiness. Someone without your perspective needs your purpose. Or maybe There's some big sister in Boston who's just trying to hold her family together after a crisis. I could really use what you've got. Microtalents are the instincts you reach for but don't train for. They are stabilizing, and in my case, life-saving. I've sung on stages all over the world, and talent ultimately got my family to a big stage, like America's Got Talent. But the way we know talent wasn't the real lifelines we needed. How we view talent after today should not be determined by what you can perform. There is no one sitting on their gifts after today. Because if it's true, a rising tide raises all ships, well, my friends, your microtalents are the rising tides. The world doesn't just need your talents. It needs the ones you didn't know counted. I'm Loren Benn-Nelson. Thank you.